There's a quiet strength in the man who doesn't chase, the one who walks away when others cling, the one who values his time more than he craves approval. This man is not heartless. He simply understands the weight of his presence, and he no longer gives it freely. You see, in a world where most men hand over their attention like spare change, the man who withholds becomes a mystery, and mystery is magnetic. Women don't fall for the man who tries the hardest. They fall for the one who's anchored, grounded, self-contained. The man who doesn't react to games, who doesn't beg, plead, or dance for attention because he knows something they don't. True power is silent, and attention, when given wisely, is not affection, it's authority. A high-value man doesn't ignore women out of spite. He does it out of clarity. Clarity that his life is not a stage for validation. Clarity that his energy is sacred. This is not about manipulation. It's about self-respect. In the next 8 parts, we'll uncover how a man reclaims the center, not by chasing her, but by choosing himself first. And in doing so, he becomes unforgettable. Because once a man understands the true value of his energy, the first thing he learns to control is who receives it. And that begins with reason 1. Reason 1. Emotion is the first test of a man's discipline. Emotion is a storm, but a man is the mountain. Every day, something pulls at you: disrespect, temptation, beauty, rejection. It wants you to flinch, to react, to prove that you can still be controlled. And that's what most men do. They hand over their power at the slightest provocation and call it love, or passion, or chemistry. But a high-value man, he knows better. He doesn't pretend emotions don't exist. He just doesn't obey them. He sees them for what they are: signals, not commands. Fire in the belly, not the captain of the ship. To him, anger is not a reason, it's a red flag. Lust isn't a call, it's a test. The man who rises doesn't do so by force. He rises by restraint, by having the capacity to explode, but choosing stillness instead. That's what separates the common from the composed. That's what makes a woman pause. Not because you chase her, but because you didn't break formation in front of her beauty. You see, the real game isn't played between men and women. It's played inside you. And the only question is, do you pass the test? Because the first test of any man's worth is how he handles emotion. Reason 2, the warrior's mind, Mushin and Fudo. Before a man can lead, he must master the battlefield within. Mushin, no mind. Fudo, immovable. 2 ancient principles, forged in the fires of Japanese martial arts, carried by warriors like Miyamoto Musashi, and today, still alive in the heart of every high-value man. Mushin is not emptiness. It's clarity. It's freedom from noise, from inner chatter, from the compulsion to react. Fudo is not passivity. It is unshakable grounding, a refusal to be moved by anything outside the self. When a woman tests you, what she's really asking is this: can I shake you? The average man buckles. He explains, he proves, he justifies. But the high-value man, he doesn't flinch. He sees the storm, and he lets it pass. Not because he's indifferent, but because he's intact. Musashi trained his sword, yes, but more than that, he trained his spirit. He learned to act with stillness, to decide from calm. In a world where every glance, every word is bait, a high-value man doesn't take the hook. He watches. He chooses. He responds without need. That's what makes him rare. Not loud, not flashy, but immovable. A man who owns his space so fully, nothing can knock him out of it. When you train your mind to be without mind, when you anchor yourself so deeply that no storm moves you, that's when the world takes notice. That's when she does too. Reason 3, the duel within, what Musashi versus Kojiro really teaches us. There's a story that echoes through time, Musashi versus Kojiro, 2 of the greatest swordsmen in Japan. But this wasn't just a duel of steel. It was a test of mind, of presence, of control. Musashi arrived late deliberately. He carved his weapon from a boat, or he stood with the sun behind him. Every detail was intention, not arrogance, not ego, just supreme command of the moment. Kojiro, he was faster, more polished, but he was reactive, emotional, and that was the beginning of his end. The lesson here isn't about swords. It's about energy. When you allow another to control your emotional tempo, you've already lost. Kojiro entered that fight to prove something. Musashi entered it to confirm nothing. He didn't need to win the crowd. He only needed to remain centered. One waited for approval. The other waited for the right moment. And that's the difference. In the modern world, the battlefield looks different, but the duel remains. She might provoke you with silence, with disrespect, with subtle games. And the question echoes, will you react or will you remain? A high-value man doesn't swing at shadows. He doesn't enter every fight, because some battles aren't worth the energy. He chooses stillness over spectacle, precision over panic. The Musashi mindset lives in men who no longer need to explain. They simply exist with purpose, and let others feel the weight of that. When the duel within and the world bends, lose it and you chase ghosts. So next time the test comes, remember Musashi. Show up late. Stay calm. Strike once. Walk away. Reason 4. Modern warriors. Kobe, Khabib, and the quiet edge. In every era, true warriors look different, but their essence stays the same. Kobe Bryant didn't wear armor. He wore silence. He wasn't known for chasing the spotlight, but for rising before the sun, practicing alone while others slept. His enemies weren't just opposing players. They were laziness, distraction, and emotion. His discipline didn't scream. It whispered through every jump shot, every stare, every game-winning move that came from relentless repetition. Then there's Khabib. In a world obsessed with noise, he stayed still. While his opponent taunted and shouted, Khabib trained. While others fed into the chaos, he remained untouched. It wasn't just his fists that crushed opponents. It was his emotional control. You could feel it, the quiet pressure, the unshakable presence, the strength that comes from not needing to prove anything. This is the essence of the high-value man in modern times. Not reactive, not loud, but centered. You don't need to be an athlete to live this. You just need to master your day, your mood, your presence. You walk into rooms differently when your validation doesn't come from being liked, but from being grounded. A high-value man doesn't chase women. He doesn't chase attention. He builds a life that commands it because it's forged in silence, sweat, and sovereign direction. When you show up like that, women notice. People notice, not because you said something loud, but because your stillness speaks louder. And when your life becomes that disciplined, that intentional, even chaos can't distract you. Reason 5, the 7 disciplines of emotional sovereignty. Every man who loses himself to chaos begins by losing a small moment, a glance, a text, a trigger, and it always starts the same way, with a reaction. High-value men train themselves to break this pattern. They live by a different code, one built not on instinct, but on inner governance. Here are the 7 disciplines every man must embody to master his emotional kingdom. Acknowledge the feeling, don't become it. When anger or desire rises, notice it like a passing storm, not a new identity. Control your breath. Control your frame. Before you speak, breathe. Inhale calm. Exhale reaction. Let your breath reset your posture. Be indifferent to validation. Compliments don't elevate you. Insults don't diminish you. Your worth is rooted within, not in anyone's approval. Don't negotiate with disrespect. When boundaries are crossed, do not debate. Withdraw. Silence is not weakness. It's a message. Guard your time like a kingdom. Don't trade hours of your life for a moment of validation. Let others work for access to your world. Speak less, mean more. Words carry weight when they are not overused. Precision reveals strength. Vagueness invites chaos. Stay on your path. Always. No matter who enters or exits your life, your mission remains. When you center on purpose, everything else orbits naturally. These aren't rules. They're rituals. And when practiced consistently, they rewire how a man moves through the world. Because the world doesn't need more men who react. It needs more men who remember who they are. Reason 6, presence over performance. Why she notices you when you don't try. There's a paradox that defines masculine energy. The less you chase, the more you attract. Not because you're playing games, but because you're already full. When a man is centered, grounded in his mission, and clear about his standards, he radiates a calm intensity. It's not loud. It doesn't beg. It doesn't perform. It simply exists and demands attention without effort. Women are hypersensitive to energy. They may not understand why they're drawn to you, but they feel it when your life doesn't revolve around them, when your plans don't shift because she calls, when your world doesn't pause because she flirts. That's the mark of a man who owns his time. The mistake most men make? They abandon their center the moment she enters the picture. They bend, cancel, reschedule, compromise, not because they want to connect, but because they're afraid to lose her. And in doing so, they lose themselves. A high-value man doesn't adjust his trajectory for temporary interest. His calendar is sacred. His commitments are armor, and his consistency is what sets him apart. You become truly attracted the moment you stop trying to be, not because you're aloof, but because your life is already complete without applause. That's not arrogance. That's sovereignty. She'll test that. She'll try to pull you off your path, not out of cruelty, but curiosity. And when you stay rooted, that's when she leans in. Because women don't fall for the man who rearranges his world for her. They fall for the man who makes her earn her place in his. Reason 7, the mindset of kings. Why you must never bow to beauty. She walks in and the room shifts. Eyes follow. Conversations stall. But a high-value man remains unmoved because he knows something most men don't. Beauty isn't power unless you hand your power to it. The average man places her on a pedestal before she's earned it. He adjusts his tone, posture, beliefs, and schedule just to keep her attention. He becomes a shadow of himself, hoping for crumbs of validation. And in doing so, he becomes invisible. But the man of value, he sees beauty, but not as a prize. He sees it as a detail, an external layer. What matters to him is energy, respect, alignment. He doesn't chase beauty because he lives by principle, not preference. This mindset creates gravity. When a man doesn't flinch around beauty, women notice. Not because he's arrogant, but because he's whole. He's met himself, faced himself, forgiven himself. So there's no empty space for her to fill. That's what makes him magnetic. A high-value man doesn't hate women. He simply doesn't worship them. He leads. He invites. But he never kneels. He is kind but not compliant. Present but not impressed. This isn't coldness, it's clarity. And clarity is what makes kings. When you truly know your worth, beauty no longer intimidates you. It enters your world like anything else, needing to prove it belongs. And the man who lives by that code becomes a mirror. She doesn't see a man begging for her attention. She sees a man reflecting her own standards back at her. And that is when the real attraction begins. Reason 8. Inner stillness is a final flex. You've heard it said, control your mind or it will control you. But here's the truth you speak. You don't need to dominate the world to win. You just need to dominate your own reactions. A man who's loud, impulsive, or constantly posturing may look strong on the outside, but inside, he's fragile. Because every time you react, every time you overexplain, every time you respond to bait, you lose leverage. You give away authority. And a high-value man never gives what he hasn't chosen to offer. Real strength is measured in restraint. Stillness. Decisiveness born from clarity, not emotion. This is a power most never develop, because it requires discipline most never practice. Inner stillness isn't about being passive. It's about being impenetrable. The ability to sit in discomfort without reaching for escape. The ability to say no when it would be easier to say yes. The ability to walk away, not to punish, but to preserve your peace. This kind of man doesn't intimidate with volume. He commands with presence. You feel his boundaries without him having to spell them out. You sense his standards the moment he enters the room. Not because he's performing, but because he's practiced. When a woman encounters this energy, it either humbles her or repels her, and both are useful. Because the high-value man does not chase alignment. He attracts it through his presence, through his silence, through his refusal to fold. He doesn't need to explain why he ignores what no longer serves him. He just does. And once a man masters that stillness, when silence becomes his weapon, not his weakness, there's only one thing left to understand. The world isn't moved by noise. It moves for men who don't flinch. If there's one truth that runs through every part of this message, it's this. The world bows to the man who doesn't flinch, not because he's perfect, not because he's loud, but because he is anchored in principle, in purpose, in peace. While most men chase validation, the high-value man chases alignment. He doesn't need to prove his worth. He embodies it. You don't rise by impressing women. You rise by impressing yourself. Every day, in silence, through action, through restraint, through the choices you make when no one's watching. A high-value man isn't just defined by what he does. He's defined by what he doesn't do. He doesn't chase chaos. He doesn't explain himself to those who don't listen. He doesn't give his energy where it's not respected. He builds. He sharpens. He holds a line. And in that stillness, he becomes undeniable. If this message spoke to you, it's because that part of you, the one that's been silent too long, is ready to rise, ready to let go of the noise, ready to stand alone if necessary, because that's where your strength is forged. So if you're walking this path, if you're done begging for attention, done apologizing for your standards, done folding for the sake of being liked, then you're in the right place. Subscribe to this channel, not just to consume, but to commit. This is an entertainment. It's a reminder that the most powerful men aren't the ones who are seen the most. They're the ones who are felt the deepest. And the world is watching in silence. Asterisk, asterisk.